And away we go.
So welcome everyone. I'm going to hand it over to Amey Hutchins, who is our moderator for today.
Greetings. I am Amey Hutchins. I'm the manuscript cataloging librarian at the Schoenberg Institute for Manuscript Studies, and I welcome you to the second day of our symposium. One note about the first day, the videos of those sessions have been posted, and there is a link to them in the chat if there are pieces of them that you would like to catch up on. Today, we will be considering the impact of digital resources and tools, perhaps especially in the time of COVID-19, on access and discovery, inclusion and exclusion. This perspective was already coming up in yesterday's discussions, and I'm looking forward to how our speakers will build on that today. The program and abstracts are available on the symposium website through the link posted in the chat. Please be aware that this session is being recorded, except for Dr. Gullo's talk and the following question period. If you have questions or concerns about the recording, please send a private chat to Emma Thompson, who's taking care of that for us. Each of our three speakers will speak for about 20 minutes. If you would like to ask a question, please use the chat function. Either write your question there or make a note that you have a question. If the discussion is going well, we may not be able to address every question, but the hosts will be saving the chat, and this afternoon's panel discussion will be another opportunity to raise questions on today's topics and issues. Lynn Ransom will be handling the questions today, and Doug Emery will be tending to the smooth running of the Zoom sessions. It is time to get started, so please mute your audio and video, but feel free to tweet using the hashtag #Esberg13. Our first speaker is independent scholar Laura Morreale. She is a cultural historian of the 13th and 14th century Italian peninsula, whose interests in medieval French language writing extend to the Latin East. She currently serves as the chair of the Digital Humanities and Multimedia Committee of the Medieval Academy of America, has recently been elected to the executive board of the Digital Medievalist, and has been the project lead for more than a dozen digital initiatives. Dr. Morreale is also leading the UPenn MS Codex 660 transcription project during this virtual symposium, and in addition to her comments now, we look forward to her discussion of the results at the wine and coffee hour at the end of the day tomorrow. Dr. Morreale?
Thank you, wonderful. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. And I think we are all set. All right, so thank you very much, and a special thanks to Lynn Ransom and everyone at the Schoenberg Institute for all the hard work that's gone into organizing this conference. I'm going to start my talk, Distant Gatherings, a Text Case for Digital Manuscript Collaborations, with a slightly personal statement that I know will resonate among many of you all. Very simply, I've missed seeing you all. For reasons we all understand, our 2020 plans for projects, for meetups and face-to-face exchanges have been eclipsed by this COVID-19 moment and have kept us from seeing each other in the ways that we all rely upon, in the ways that nourish our scholarship and our intellectual lives. And yet, as we've all discovered, life goes on, and we have all learned how to cope, and maybe even to flourish within this unexpected moment. What I'd like to suggest today is that due to this very dramatic change in how we're living our lives and the expectations we continue to bring to our scholarly work, we've begun to see this world differently, to imagine ways of using our skills as medievalists that benefit from the digital tools we have at our disposal and our newfound proficiencies with them. I came to this conclusion after making two observations. First, that the Zoom-only conferences, which have become our default, simply replicate older forms of in-person interaction without allowing us to profit from the real benefits that face-to-face meetings allow. This is why, despite all the hard work and effort that go into organizing these events, there remains this sense of dissatisfaction when we all individually turn away from our screens at the end of a presentation and go back to our lockdown lives. We all know that Zoom fatigue is real. And yet, secondly, it's not the medium that is the problem, only the way we've chosen to use it. We only need to recognize that people still, even in lockdown, willingly spend a lot of time communicating online, on Twitter and other social media platforms, for example, to understand that there's some value to be had in digital engagement. So, how do we harness the power of digital interactions for scholarly work without sacrificing the important exchange that occurs in more traditional formats? The challenge in my mind is less to build new tools or structures to support the distant gatherings we now attend than to reconfigure what we currently have to capitalize on the unique characteristics of the digital medium. And what are these characteristics? Computer-enabled work relies upon its own strengths, including the ability to disseminate information efficiently, to collate and visualize data too great for humans to manage on their own, to virtually bring together items that are physically separate, and to manipulate and modify sources without causing harm to the originals. Distanced scholarship that relies upon the online world capitalizes on the very qualities we have come to expect in our everyday communicative practice. It's dynamic, user-driven, interconnected, and responsive to visitors, all characteristics we should first identify and then use to our advantage when we undertake digital scholarship. Now, I have found that time-bound digital events that rely heavily on the dynamic quality of virtual exchange, that promote transparent and public-facing communities, and that circle around a circumscribed set of questions or problems, much like a Facebook post that poses a thorny question and then elicits a lengthy response. These have been very successful ways to bring people together to engage in online scholarship. Now, what does that mean in real life? How does that work out? Today, I'll be profiling 3 different manuscript-based projects that have capitalized on the qualities of online communication I've just outlined. These include the Deiphira translation project, the La Sfera and Image du Monde transcription challenges, and the Pèlerinage de Demoiselle Sapience transcription event, which Amey just mentioned, which is taking place right now as we speak. All 3 of these projects rely upon the same basic workflow, but they unfold over different time spans. The Pèlerinage event, as we know, was engineered as a 3-day sprint. The transcription challenges are styled as 2-week efforts, and the Deiphira stretches over a longer period of time, but still requires a relatively minimal weekly time commitment from project participants. In all of these projects, we began with a manuscript or a set of manuscripts that had been digitized so that the images are freely accessible to anyone. Once we located the desired manuscripts for each of these projects, we loaded images into a transcription platform called From the Page so that everyone involved in the project could access the manuscript and type up a transcription of the work directly in the transcription pane. Now, in transcribing, or in the case of images, describing what we see in the digitized copy, we scrutinize the copy of the medieval work, we create our own 21st century version of that text, and we record our observations of the manuscript or the text along the way. Once the transcription is complete, we're then able to export it in a text file and create any kind of final product that we would like. The tech part here is so easy as to be almost a non-issue, which I think is an important part of what has made these projects effective. These then are the mechanics of these online projects: digitized manuscript to transcription platform to exported text to final product. But of course, the machines and digitized images are not doing the scholarly work that needs to get done. It's the people who do that. We must also recruit and organize participants in the project, then provide the framework for how the work will proceed. Naturally, the framework for how the work gets done varies according to the project parameters. So I'm going to start then to talk a little bit about the Deiphira translation project centered around the TYP 422 manuscript housed at Harvard's Houghton Library. The Deiphira is a minor literary work by the well-known humanist author Leon Battista Alberti, and it's been identified as the first dialogue on love in Italian vernacular literature, so a work of some consequence. The dialogue is about a woman named Deiphira, and the conversation takes place between Polymacro, the man who loves her, and Philarco, his interlocutor, who claims to be wise in the ways of love and especially of women, but we're all sort of doubtful of that at this point. If you look closely at the image on the frontispiece of the Houghton TYP 422 manuscript, which I've reproduced here for you, you can see those three figures, presumably the characters we meet in the dialogue. The Deiphira is the only text in the 36 folio manuscript, and it's written in a nice, clear humanist script. So starting in April of this year, a group of 9 scholars, who I like to call the Deiphira 9, began a collaborative project to transcribe and translate the digitized version of the manuscript. The impetus for the project was largely selfish. As the grip of lockdown tightened, many of us were feeling isolated, and we were looking for ways to connect with other scholars, to continue to research, and to share our expertise. So the Deiphira 9 decided to meet up using the tools that the digital world now offers us: Zoom meetings and shared Google Docs, a WordPress website to collect our materials, and you can see the address at the top of the slide if you want to check it out. And then the digitized manuscript to keyboard text workflow that I just outlined for you. As we have transcribed and translated this work into English, we have come to enjoy and to really capitalize on the digital environment as we build our working community of friends centered around this text. We meet twice a week on Zoom for an hour each time, first to do a very close analysis of the manuscript and the version of the text found in it, and then to produce an English language translation. And I'm pretty strict about keeping it at just 1 hour so people know what they're in for and that the project is not burdensome. During these meetings, we've already completed a full transcription of the manuscript, and just this past week, we completed the first run through our English translation. Our next steps will be to do another read through and to normalize our translation, but these things will all be done collaboratively, which means we benefit from everybody's expertise and perspective. In terms of the research products that have come out of our efforts so far, we've put together a collation diagram using VisCol, so thank you, Dot and Alberto. We've isolated various hands within the manuscript and the corrections made to it. We've discovered that the TYP 422 was actually extracted from a much larger manuscript, and we've posted some of these findings in a preliminary project at Digital Mappa that brings together the manuscript images, our transcription, our translation, and the collation diagrams. We hope then to gather all of these materials into a digital site housed at Georgetown University and add a collation of our edition to the standard print edition from the 1970s. Our Georgetown hosted edition will also include annotations, a manuscript recension, and supplementary essays on the text and our methodology. And we hope to have this done in the next 6 months or so. Now, the second project, or rather group of projects I'll talk about, is a series of 2-week manuscript transcription challenges that Stanford Rare Books curator Benjamin Albritton and I organized and staged over this past summer and fall. To date, there have been 3 of these transcription challenges, the first featuring multiple manuscripts of Gorodati's 15th century geographic text called La Sfera, and the most recent, which just finished up in October, treating the first half of the first recension of Gussuin de Metz's mid-13th century scientific treatise, The Image du Monde. So La Sfera and The Image du Monde, all of that information there for you. Now, the inspiration for the first challenge, a competition to transcribe versions of Dati's work, was the result, quite honestly, of just too much time on Twitter. In the earlier days of lockdown in the US, Ben and I were lamenting our mutual feelings once again of isolation, and we came up with this idea to connect with other scholars who might enjoy gathering around and engaging with the text through the act of transcribing it collaboratively. We identified La Sfera as a good candidate, since we could easily locate digitized versions of the text at Yale, the Arsenal in Paris, and the Vatican Library. We loaded the images of each of these versions into Stanford Library's instantiation from the page, and then we created a quick WordPress website where we collected all the materials that we would need for the challenge and then set out the terms of the competition. We created team pages with links to the transcription platform, a project log, and a link to the rules and guidelines, so everyone sort of knew what they were up to. Through our personal networks and the magic of Twitter, we were able to build 3 teams of 10 scholars each, Team USA, Équipe France, and Squadra Italia. The rosters were filled and a group of team captains put in place about a week before the competition began, at which time each team would have 2 weeks to complete their transcriptions and submit them to the panel of 3 judges. They assessed each submission according to speed, accuracy, and collaborative participation. And once this first competition began officially, the work was really fast and furious. Within about 24 hours of the start time, roughly half of the transcription work had already been done, and teams were moving on to the review stage. Ben and I, along with many other competitors, were constantly tweeting updates to track our progress or to highlight what was discovered in our manuscripts, whether it was a strange writing style or an unusual map, or even a party of dragons who were hanging out in a misidentified Tower of Babel. During this first day of competition, that first 24 hours or so, our tweets attracted a lot of attention from art historians, from librarians who had a copy of La Sfera in their own repositories, to fellow medievalists who were just interested in what was going on, and DH scholars who were really intrigued by the competition's framework. After the first flush of excitement, the teams began to buckle down and engage in the nitty-gritty of producing a clean transcription to submit to the judges. Now, to do this, teams use several forms of digital communication, including Slack to really for inter-team communication, Twitter to really speak more publicly, and then the challenge team pages where members would post observations, some research, and some substantive findings. The first event was so successful and the demand for a second phase was so strong that we brought in 5 more copies of La Sfera and ran a second transcription challenge in late July, meaning that at the end of the second 2-week challenge, we had 8 full transcriptions of this text from 8 different manuscripts. Along the way, our transcription work inspired a deep engagement with the text itself on the part of our transcribers, who produced some amazing scholarship, like this blog post authored by team captain Carrie Benish, comparing the different scripts across the 8 manuscripts. And you can still read Carrie's small essay on the Team Vatican page of the La Sfera website. We've also cataloged and made public all the data, all the transcriptions created during these events, so that other scholars can learn about the challenges and use our transcriptions in their own work. Now, one of the greatest points of pride, for me at least, over the course of these challenges is that all told, somewhere between 75 and 100 medievalists have participated, each bringing his, her, or their own expertise and enthusiasm to the effort in their own ways. And I know a lot of transcribers are out in the audience right now listening. And it's been really gratifying to see our community come together through these projects. And I hope that other scholars will come forth who want to adopt this model and propose their own texts. And speaking of other texts, I'll just take my last few minutes to talk about the Pèlerinage de Damoiselle Sapiens transcription event that's going on as a part of the Schoenberg Conference. The task for the 30 event participants, just as we have mapped it out on the event website, is to transcribe the 10 folios of the Pèlerinage de Damoiselle Sapiens, a previously unedited work from UPenn's MS 660, then to prepare a set of rules for the transcription we make, that's today's task, and then to create a narrative section to introduce our methodology and the work itself. Our goal is to prepare all of these scholarly products, bring them together into one document, and then submit our work to the digital medievalist for possible publication in the journal as one of their methods articles. For this event, we've chosen the metaphor of the relay race, and this is the spirit that has been brought to the work since yesterday morning. We have 3 teams working together, passing the baton from one to the next. Team transcription began the event by transferring the text from the digital images of UPenn's MS 660 to the transcription pane, and then passing the baton off to team revision, today's team, who's now reviewing the version created by the first leg of the race and creating their transcription statement that sets out the rules. Tomorrow, team submission will take us all the way to our finish line of a fully transcribed text with a transcription statement and a small narrative and how we got our work done. Now, in a relay race, you watch your teammates intently, you support them and encourage them when you can, and you build the strategy for your own participation based on what they accomplish. So with this ethos in mind, we've been watching intently what our teammates have been doing as they complete their leg of the race, cheering them on through channels like Twitter or Facebook, for example, and strategizing for our chance to take the baton. This event then is a test case for a digital methodology that brings together transcribers from near and far, as mapped on the Demoiselle Sapiens participant map. And it's an experiment with different ways that our workflow might function on a very limited timeline. So to wrap up, I think the elements that make these events work so well are the following. There's really a well-defined time period that allows participants to know what they're in for. The easy tech allows for a very low barrier of entry. And I think they both promote and rely upon communication and community. These are all important aspects. So where do we go next? These projects have tested the waters of our digital scholarly practice, and they represent but one way to gather together around manuscripts while at a distance from the work and from each other. While virtual manuscript work will never replace interacting with the material objects, that's for sure, we can enjoy these distant gatherings for now, knowing that we're engaging in real scholarly work, even as we look to the day that we can finally map out new journeys to unite with these materials and with each other. Now, I started with a personal statement, and I will end with one as well. Like many medievalists who followed a non-traditional career path, who could never displace themselves to spend extended periods of time in the archives or take up visiting teaching positions, I found that the shift to online work was really a comfortable one for me. In fact, I had already spent years learning how to work at a distance when our lockdown lives began. Certainly, post-COVID scholarship will look different than what has come before. As medievalists recover from this moment and we are forced to recalibrate our scholarly methods, as I'm sure we will, I encourage the community to look especially to those scholars with non-traditional backgrounds who may already have navigated some of the challenges that will face us as we move beyond this pandemic moment. And I'll stop there and thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much. I feel as though we have talked a lot about how we can use digital methods to bring scattered manuscripts together, but it's really heartening to hear about using the tools to bring scattered scholars together. So now we will take time for questions on this talk.
Hi, yeah, we already have one question in for Laura. Federico Botana, do you want to ask directly? If you could turn your video on and I'll let you take it away.
Yeah, it's done. Thank you. I have worked on Deiphira, and I had a lot of problems sort of working with the printed editions, which I think is more or less the early 1500 edition, which was re-edited in the 19th century. And there's so much difference in manuscripts, but it's still the same text. We can see where the errors are, and I think there's big need for a critical edition. Is that with what you've been producing, is that a possibility? I think it would be very helpful for everybody.
Well, at this point, we're kind of taking the approach that each manuscript is its own product. And there's an amazing joy, I think, that the participants felt in engaging so deeply with all these variations. And then, I mean, it's really great to be able to see all 8 of them up and see where things don't match up. And, even the sort of adjustments that the scribes were making, right, as they were working through these different variations and copying. And so it's such a huge tradition. I think there are over 150 extant versions. So it would be an enormous amount of work if someone wanted to undertake it. And you and I should talk. But
where have I put my foot?
Yeah, but for the moment, it's more, giving, sort of honoring those individual witnesses. But we'll see where the project goes. Thanks.
Yeah, it would be great to see. I'd love to see it because I must say I have to struggle a lot with sometimes it's the sound only that makes things change. But anyway, I'll stop there. Thank you very much for your answer.
Absolutely.
All right, I see Catherine Chandler has a question.
Hi, yes. I participated in the most recent transcription project, which was very challenging and a lot of fun. And so I'm not sure if it's important to have a critical edition come out of the project or what, but as somebody who's more of a liturgist and somebody who works more with music manuscripts, is it possible that there might be a project involving liturgical texts or music texts, ones that involve more Latin West liturgical things?
Thank you so much, and thanks for your participation. I will just tell you too that the judges for the Image du Monde got in touch with me last night, and there is a decision, so that will come out very soon. But in terms of what comes out and what sort of challenges appear later, what I really hope, and I know Ben Albritton and I agree on this, is that we hope that people will take the model and will run their own challenges, because frankly, it's a lot of fun, but it's a lot of work, right? And so, and you know, to tell you the truth, I've learned so much doing them about those particular texts. And so I think it's a really great way both to advertise the text that you're interested in and the work that you've done on it, right? But also to, you know, bring that expertise. I never could have imagined what people, you know, what they brought to the challenges. It was so amazing, the work and the génie, right, that people brought. So thanks.
It was great fun. Thank you so much for all the hard work you do.
It was a lot of fun.
Thank you. Are there other questions from the audience? If not, I have one. And so I'll go ahead and ask it. And if anyone has another question, they can write it in. I just kind of following up on that, and also the lovely visual of the map with people all over the world participating. I wonder like how much you thought about like how this kind of project might scale up. I'm not sure it needs to scale up, but you know, how do you make it larger? How do you make it, not you, but how does one make it larger? How does one make it more inclusive? And what would be the challenges, if there are any, other than just the fact that it's a lot of work for one person to manage? Like, have you thought about other platforms to put this out on, or?
There probably are other platforms. I mean, you know, part of the reasons that we use the tools that we did is because they're, you know, almost universally accessible, and, you know, people, you know, most everybody can get onto a Google Doc. So, you know, that we relied on those tools in that way. In terms of how one might scale it up, certainly you could do more delegation. You know, my role as the coordinator of these events, particularly La Sfera and the Image du Monde, was really just to absorb any problems that would come along and try to fix those things. And so I'm sure if you were to have, you know, 3 people doing that job, that could be done as well. I mean, I haven't really thought making it bigger. I was overwhelmed that 50 plus, you know, scholars were participating in each of these things. It was great. So sorry, Lynn.
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm not, I mean, I think it's fantastic. I don't mean to suggest that it needs to get bigger or anything, but it just seems like it's such a good idea, and you could really just run with it, you know, and get so much new data out there. So,
right.
Anyway, well, congratulations. It's been fun to watch. Okay, so one person has another question has come in. Sarah Savant, do you want to ask?
Sure, I was actually asking sort of the opposite question to you, I think, or a slightly different question, which is, how did you get started in the first place? And what is I mean, it's quite a lot to get 50 people, I think. And what is kind of the value that you think brought people to want to do this? You know, it strikes me a little bit like hackathons, but that people do in computer science. But what motivates everyone? And people don't have time. I mean, you know, even in lockdown, there's a lot of people who are juggling more, not less.
I got to tell you, Sarah, I mean, I was amazed that people would do this. But, you know, one of the things that I like to build into any of these events is a little bit of fear. I mean, I think the competition thing gets people going. I mean, we're all, you know, polite people. But at the end of the day, like, we want to win, right? And so I think there's that little bit that's in there, and that's, you know, I built that into the Demoiselle Sapiens thing too. Like, we need to be done by Friday night, right? And the
Yes.
challenge is how can we do that? So I think it's the combination of that little bit of sort of thrill, fear, and then the limited time span. When you say to
Yeah.
somebody, listen, for the challenges, I would say, listen, if you're just doing transcription, if you're not a team captain or anything, like 5 to 6 hours tops, you get to interact with everybody, you get to do something that you really enjoy doing and that maybe, your 10-year-old doesn't care about who's sitting right. And so it's 5 to 6 hours tops. You get to be part of this team, interact with people, and then 2 weeks, we're done. Like we're done, right? And so I think that allows people a little bit of joy in what they're doing.
So really strict project timing, like knowing and being loyal to that. Okay. And I love the competition idea.
We all do.
We all do. Yeah, no, exactly. Yeah. Thank you.
All right, I think we're at time for a question, so I'll hand it over to Amey to start.
Thank you. Our second speaker today is Alessandro Bausi from the Universität Hamburg. He's a philologist who has published extensively on Ge'ez texts and Ethiopian and Eritrean textual and manuscript cultures. Since 2009, he has been professor for Ethiopian and Eritrean studies at the Asian Africa Institute and director of the Hiob Ludolf Center at Universität Hamburg. He is the editor of the journal Ethiopica, International Journal of Ethiopian and Eritrean Studies, and of its supplement series, and consultant for Ge'ez and Ethiopian and Eritrean studies for several other series and journals. He is now heading the long-term, by which I mean 2016 to 2040, project of the Academy of Sciences and Humanities in Hamburg to create a comprehensive research environment for the written heritage of Christian Ethiopia and Eritrea. That project will be the subject of his talk today. Dr. Bausi?
Thank you very much. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you. I will share my screen. Yes. Yes. So, and I will start by reading a short text, and then I will comment on the basis of a presentation and some slides. This is the kind of format which I found most suitable for the occasion. So first of all, I'm extremely grateful to the organizers of this event. First of all, to Dr. Lynn Ransom for the kind invitation to take part in this symposium, for which I feel extremely honored. For overlapping meetings and tasks, I could not attend the first day, and I apologize very much for this. I also apologize in advance for not being able to answer specific questions on the technical structure and infrastructure of the project I represent. Unfortunately, the technical lead, whom I asked to jointly present with me, Dr. Pietro Liuzzo, is as busy as I am, particularly in these days, and could not accept my proposal. His book, which I will show in a moment, and the project platform itself provide immediate answers on this point. If you're interested in any further details, please contact him. So what is the project vHMML? First of all, vHMML is an Ethiopic word which means library, simply. So vHMML, Manuscripts of Ethiopia and Eritrea, is a long-term project funded within the framework of the German Academy's program. That is a national program of long-term projects in the humanities, coordinated by the Union of the German Academies of Sciences and Humanities, and for this project under survey of the Akademie der Wissenschaften in Hamburg. The funding will be provided for 25 years, so it has started in 2016, and it should last until 2040. The project is hosted by the Hiob Ludolf Center for Ethiopian and Eritrean Studies at the Asian Africa Institute of the Universität Hamburg. Manuscripts in Ethiopia and Eritrea are for the most part still preserved by church parishes scattered all over the highlands, often in places difficult to reach. There is no reliable figure for the total number of surviving Ethiopic manuscripts. The number is likely in hundreds of thousands. While the assumed total numbers are very high, the number of historical, most valuable for researchers, manuscripts is diminishing at a quick pace as they are gradually substituted by more recent ones. I think I can show at least a map just to place ourselves in the right area. Field research confirms that over 90% of each manuscript collection is composed of manuscripts dating from the 19th and 20th century. This, of course, is not astonishing. It is in keeping with a culture where print was introduced, I would say, only in the second half of the 20th century. This does not diminish, or rather, on the contrary, this underlines the necessity to record what has survived until today. Older manuscripts, often in bad state of preservation, damaged and or incomplete, are frequently not assigned the value they deserve, according to a well-known philological principle. One of the project aims is thus to try to recover as much as possible of this endangered heritage by exploring, digitizing, and describing the yet unstudied manuscript collections in Ethiopian and Eritrean highlands. Yet, this is not all, and I would say this is not even, to some extent, the most important part of the project. The relationship between the older and the newer manuscripts is quite reversed in the collections of European and USA libraries. Manuscripts in these libraries have to a large degree been described in catalogs, but these descriptions are often incomplete, outdated, and mainly focused on texts, often leaving aside the details of the physical and codicological structure, on the content of the marginal notes and other paratextual, or as we are used to say in Hamburg, paracontents information. Besides, for the moment, there is no hyper-catalog that would allow a researcher to work with multiple collections simultaneously. These and other lacunae are to be breached to the extent that this is and will be possible by the Maṣāḥǝft project. The project started a few years ago with the aim at creating a comprehensive research environment for the description and multimedia display and access of the written heritage of Christian Ethiopia and Eritrea. At the center of the environment, there is a relational database on Ge'ez and Amharic manuscripts and inscriptions as well, which we consider a consistent and important component of the Schriftkultur, of the writing culture of the area. So collecting data and information on works and texts, paratexts and paracontents, colophons, additional notes, but also on authors, owners, scribes, places, and institutions, as well as data on all available physical features of the manuscripts. Special attention is dedicated to the essential features of the complexity of the codex book form due to its modularity, as we well know, according to path-breaking contributions in the field, which have highlighted the consequences also in the textual domain of these essential features. That is, that manuscripts vary in the course of time, and with them also the text and our perception of texts. The project website also provides digital image supplied wherever possible, and some of the texts and passages edited. Texts are also linked to a lexicon, which has also been developed thanks to the interaction with other projects. There was a main ERC project for 5 years, the project Traces, which was particularly dedicated to the, let's say, diachronical examination of the Ge'ez languages. Given, the portal interoperability with other online repositories allows search from one central place across several existing platforms, and the user can thus perform queries on texts, authors, scribes, places, institutions, and codicological elements for most known and accessible manuscripts from Ethiopia and Eritrea. I will provide also a couple of figures which give you an idea of the amount of manuscripts that we have been able at the moment to include in our platform. This is from a report which was produced this year, so it refers to data assessed as of 2019. And you have also the incremental addition in the course of 1 year. I can comment also concerning this data. Given the specific goals of the project and its structure since its very inception, the outbreak of the COVID-19 pandemic has, in the last months, prevented, of course, field trips, research, and digitization in the Horn of Africa, but has not affected the research work based on the platform, that quite on the contrary has proved effective and quite sustainable. The project is active in several ways, through paper presentations at local, national, and international conferences, so a very traditional way of dissemination, organization of workshops and panels, publications, and something which has become a sort of flag of this project, an annual summer school in Ethiopian and Eritrean manuscript studies, which we were able to organize for the first time in 2016 and twice in Ethiopia, one in Morreale and once in Addis Ababa. We had also a sort of mini summer school in Eritrea, as you might know, an extremely difficult country where it has become impossible to carry out research now for decades. We have also field research, digitizations campaigns in Europe, Egypt, and Ethiopia, hosting fellows, and so on. Extremely important is that we have a number of sub-projects which have been developed in addition to our regular partnerships, which I will mention in detail in a moment. So we have special projects on the collections of the National Library of Copenhagen, the Monastery of Dar es-Suryan in Egypt, the Bodleian Library in Oxford, and several Italian collections, among which, for example, the Biblioteca Medicea Laurenziana in Florence. We have also a participation and a quite active presence on digital humanities events. Well, this was more or less what I wanted to say concerning some general features of the project. Crucial here for our work are actually the partnership. And I should mention the partnership indicated here by the sigle EMIP, so Ethiopian Manuscript Image Project, which is a USA project headed by Steve de la Marter, that has digitized thousands of manuscripts from Ethiopian as well as from private collections, particularly in North America. So the whole bulk of data, at the moment, actually only digital image, so almost nothing in terms of cataloging data, has now been moved to our platform, which has also a copy. And so the data, as soon as they are entered, are immediately interacting with whatever else is produced on the basis of the other collections. We have also an extremely important partnership with the Ethiopian Manuscript Microfilm Library, which is hosted at HMML, Hill Monastic Manuscript Library. And we have inherited a lot of metadata on thousands of first microfilm and then digitized data. And we have also interaction with the Hisl Horn Afr project. This is the acronym of a project on the Islamic manuscript cultures from the Horn of Africa. One more slide which can provide other data. I think this is an idea of, let's say, of how the amount of information we are hosting and producing in terms of authority files and tagging texts and recovering text from old catalogs and checking wherever it's possible against image available, we are able to produce updated descriptions of historical funds from European libraries, as well as from whatever we are able to encompass. I would like to stress that, of course, we do not pretend, even in such a relatively long term, to be able to cover everything. This is something which I would say scholarly doesn't make any sense to say I will do everything. But what we want to do is to have a critical mass which allows us, let's say, to place immediately at the right place new data, which will keep on entering and being considered by the project. So I think I can pass to show you some, these are all texts, which is not important. This is the book which I have mentioned and which I would be, I think it's at least an ambitious attempt. It is a monograph which is printed on paper and of course also freely available online, so you can download the book. And it is the attempt by our technical lead, Dr. Pietro Liuzzo, to present a concept for a comprehensive digital approach, not only to, I would say, Ethiopian and Eritrean manuscript studies, but Ethiopian and Eritrean studies in general. And in a country, in an area like this, in the Horn of Africa, the manuscripts are, I would say, the main door to understand the past. So there is much more besides what is related exclusively to the information traditionally associated to manuscripts that must be considered. So that's why the title is not limited to manuscripts, but it has simply the word studies. This is also based on the experience from which this project vHMML started. So here in Hamburg, it was produced what is considered the most comprehensive lexicon on a sub-Saharan country. So the 5 volumes of the Encyclopedia Ethiopica. We have in the last volume of this work, which I co-edited and brought to accomplishment some years ago, a comprehensive index of over 600 pages with a lot of names of people, places, institutions, works, and so on, which has in fact worked as the basis for the digital platform that we are using at the moment. This is the first page of the platform, vHMML, and you have here below also the address. And we have a number of facilities which are offered from every kind of search. Of course, we had also to approach quite sophisticated issues in terms of normalization of the transcription, because Ethiopic, classical Ethiopic or Ge'ez used a syllabary which poses additional challenges, not because it is impossible to represent it, but once it has to be transcribed, actually there is no single standard. Even the Encyclopedia Ethiopica standard is not satisfactory enough because it considers the spoken language, but not the written word. So we had to develop a series of devices which are crucial in order to overcome these problems. So let me show you something which might be less trivial than just a search, but you can see already here that a filter search brings you immediately also to the image of the manuscripts in case these are available. We accept, of course, the FFF standard, and we use, so we are able to provide images from all the institutions which work according to this standard. Now, I think here there is something interesting. Yes. As I said, the concept of the work was to start from the collections considered by historical catalogs. So we think that really the cataloging is understood in its deepest meaning is the right point where to start the work on the manuscript. First of all, we didn't want to lose what had been done in the past. This was extremely important in our concept. And so we covered for the moment as a priority historical funds from Paris, the Vatican City, London, St. Petersburg. We have several Russian mother tongue people in our team, and this is also extremely important. And we plan to cover the core of these historical collections in the first phases of the project, which would mean in the next 5 years. We are now at the end of the first phase. I think that my time is probably come to the end, and I could show you a couple of slides more, but in the end, I think that this wouldn't be enough. And you can do yourself if you take maybe a few minutes just to navigate this website, which I must say is not aesthetically particularly nice. So I know this, but we have really looked at the substance of the work. There is a lot of work really. And there is a lot of interoperability with other platforms and with other resources. So that's all from my part. And I thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much.
I'm
So-
trying to, sorry.
That's all right. We can start the call for questions. Are there any questions for Alessandro? It's a fascinating project, and I have some if there are no immediate questions.
I do as well.
I'm
But
sorry, I hope you can hear me. I'm not able to stop my presentation, and the problem and the software.
Uh-oh, I think we might have lost him. If there are questions, why don't we go ahead and type them in to the chat while we're waiting for Alessandro to get sorted out?
I think
Maybe Betsy, can you step in and unshare the screen, possibly?
Yes, I can. Give me a second.
Alessandro, can you hear us? We may have lost him temporarily. Is he in the meeting still?
I don't see him.
Yeah, I think he might have gotten.
Yeah, he was hung up on his end, I believe.
Well, how about this? Why don't we go ahead and start with the third paper, and then we can have some time for questions for Alessandro if he can come back on, and I will let him know through chat that's what we're doing.
okay, that sounds good.